thought that it'd be good to air out before we begin today. No snags. Okay, I want to continue what we started before. We're in the area of analysis, which I mentioned on Wednesday is one of the two main pressure points in the thesis, where you're doing your primary work. One, in the analysis, you're pushing into your topics, and in the application, you're looking at the form implications of your research. So let's continue in the analysis category and see how far we get today. Did anything that I mentioned last time raise any questions for you guys? Anything that you want to answer? Okay, so let's reconstruct something here. Let's put analysis up here, which is where we are. And we talked about, I'm just going to assume two topics. I don't know how many we have. Somebody may have one, somebody may have three. Just for the purposes of the diagram, we'll assume two. One point that I want to remind us of is these topics, these terms, or let's call them areas of investigation, they will have been identified earlier, and what you say here in the analysis needs to be consistent with some other things in the thesis. For example, your title, your diagram, the table of contents, and your abstract. What you're calling these things need to be the same terms that are being used over here. And so, if I look at your, let's just start with the title. If I read your title, I should be able to infer what it is you're promising to investigate. And that's why usually you have a main title and then a subtitle. By the diagram will have taken the things you're promising to investigate in the title, and we'll elaborate on that in terms of a process graphic. Those terms need to carry over here so that we can see what it is you carried down from the title and what you're promising to do and how you're promising to do it in the diagram. And then obviously that's going to be treated down in the table of contents and in the abstract. So the first point I'm making is whatever this stuff is, keep taking pains to make sure that it locks onto this, and you're not using synonyms and you're not using similar terms, but you're using exactly the same terms. So now let's just assume we're going to analyze one of these. So now we're going to talk about the analysis of this. We talked before about, I won't go over again, but I'll just say, we talked about whatever the topic is. There's going to be a description of it, an overview of it, a treatment of the major issues within it that are relevant to the thesis, and then the distillation of the principles that are going to carry over into your application. All that stuff we talked about before. So we don't need to belabor that again. And there are really two main kinds of things you're looking to get out of the analysis of this. One is to understand the topic. In other words, this is just you entering into it, immersing yourself in it, being knowledgeable about it, having done reading about it, thinking about it, writing about it. This is basically a kind of knowing. You're basically trying to get familiar with it, and in your analysis, you're proving through your narrative that you understand the topic, whatever it happens to be. And then over here, you're looking for form implications. these are really two kinds of goals or two kinds of efforts that are going on in the analysis. And we talked before about how the form implications can be direct or they could be indirect. The direct ones are principles that directly apply to form. In other words, if you make the roof this shape, you will harvest more water. Or if you use this kind of material or do this wall section, your building will have a lower air conditioning bill. So sometimes these harvested principles or implications, they're direct. Other times they're indirect. In other words, we're taking a poetic, metaphoric approach to harvesting things where the implication is not direct in the sense of here's a rule for how to do it directly, but it's indirect. You're taking sort of a roundabout or an indirect way to looking at the form implications, in the sense that some of you are dealing with very artistic topics, for example. So your transformation exercises and by transformation, I mean working on that bridge between idea and form with little abstract expression diagrams. In some cases, these may be drawings and diagrams and little models that are direct explorations of the principles. And in other cases, they're going to be poetic, bridging, interpretive, intuitive expressions and form explorations of whatever the metaphors are that you're choosing to explore that you teased out of your analysis. So this is the flow of the analysis that's heading toward your application. This is the kind of harvesting we're talking about that you're going to eventually bring to bear on your application, where you show through some physicalization of your research what it means, whether it's building, furniture. We've been over that list before. On this side, this is really more where the scholarship is. And this is where the design is branching off. Now, this means you're going to do something to the topic. And that's where this way of working comes in. It's not going to be good enough to say, I'm studying this topic, and then you kind of muddle into it and you mess around with it and you maybe put a few ideas down and but it never really adds up to anything. You don't ever really push into it. You don't have a way of working. You don't have a method of attack. So my pitch is in this series of lectures is to have a way of working, to have a way of attacking the topic, have a way of doing something to it in a very deliberate way. And I'm going to expand on that in a little bit. So this doing is going to ultimately flow in two directions. One kind of doing is trying to tease out form implications. Another kind of doing is to somehow work your way into it using some method in order to understand it better. So what I'm going to add over here and move into today is the whole notion of paradigm. Or sometimes it's called a model. Now, why is that something you may want to keep in mind as a way of working? You'll see when I get into the pieces of what makes up a paradigm, it's a nice way of picturing how any topic is put together. Doesn't matter what the topic is. For example, all topics have category systems. All topics have ways of talking about its stuff. All topics have pieces that make it up. So you'll see in a minute when I go over, in effect, a paradigm for paradigms. My pitch today is that one way of coming at the scholarship aspect of your topic, in order to have a way or a template or a method to push into it, is having the paradigm sitting over here as a reminder for the kinds of thoughts you can think about it, for the kinds of ways you can push into it, the kinds of analyses you may want to pursue. And so what we're talking about here is tools. We're talking about techniques and ways of working. I keep coming back to that title. Now what I want to do now is do a little aside over here. For example, we can talk about investigative styles. We can talk about different kinds of methods. I'm just going to put some examples up here and show you what I mean by that, using some other fields. For example, if you ever sat next to an archaeologist on an airplane and asked them how they work, archaeologists go out to sites that used to be the place where something at one time was built, like a town or a village or something like that. And you'll see what they do is they grid the site, and then they have over here a computer model or a drawing of that same grid, and then systematically they dig down and research grid by grid by grid by grid, so that as they find things, they can map those things on the grid over here. So their ultimate goal is to reconstruct some past environment, usually. They're trying to show how the temple was laid out, even though it's 20 feet under the ground, or they're trying to show how that ancient village was laid out, or they're trying to discover how the people back then built certain things. And so the archaeologist's ultimate goal is to reconstruct a past reality. That's what they're looking to do. And they have methods for doing that. And they ensure they're going to be systematic because they have methods for digging that are very careful. They use certain tools not to mess things up. They grid the site. They know they're working on grid 6B. Over here on the map, 6B starts having drawings of things as they find them. And so there's kind of a correspondence here. That's a way of working that ensures systematic, methodical, careful, thorough treatment of whatever it is you're looking at. If you happen to be sitting next to an FBI agent on the plane, you'll see the way they work is like this. There's a crime. Obviously, their ultimate goal is to find the culprit. And what they do is they start looking at anybody connected with the situation at all. In other words, they throw a big net over it. And one by one, they eliminate possibilities with alibis or excuses or whatever it happens to be. Until finally they're down to a few suspects. And then they switch to other tools which are looking at these few last possibilities of people who might have been responsible. So this is another way of working, where you start with anybody and everybody, and you gradually eliminate things, people, until you get down to the few that are likely candidates. If you sit next to a doctor, they've got a situation which I'll just represent as a mess here, because all they know is the patient walks through the door and says, "This hurts." Well, they don't know why it hurts or what's wrong with the patient. So what they begin to do, based upon what's hurt, is they've got a list of possibilities that might be causing that. And then they've got a battery of tests out here. And one by one, they begin to test for what it might be. So some of these tests eliminate possibilities. Some of these tests begin to confirm what it might be. So the doctor's ultimate goal, obviously, is to find out what the problem is so they can do something about it. And this diagnostic way of working is first of all looking at what's wrong, what's likely to be wrong, what's likely to be the cause, and then applying a series of tests which eliminate, you know, this is negative, that's negative, that's negative, that's probably what it is. Now let's use this test to see if we can positively identify what it is. And then waiting over here, obviously, are therapeutic treatment. So this is still another model or a way of working, which in this case is trying to identify some cause behind something. That's kind of the configuration of the problem as it's served up. If you sit next to an investigative reporter, you have some event, and the reporter is looking for angles onto that. So the reporter interviews a bunch of people, and what the reporter is doing is he or she is looking at perspectives onto some occasion. What do the cops say about it? What do the bystanders say about it? What's the mayor say about it? What do the bus drivers say about it? So in effect, what they're doing is they're looking at different stances or places that could be positions in relation to the thing, and they're going around and they're talking to people about what their angle onto it is. And so that's still another model, is what are all the angles and ways of making sense onto something. And that's the investigative reporter. The last one I'll put up here is a forensic pathologist. What they've got, again, is an event, usually a crime. And what they're trying to do is to take this mess and to reconstruct in some orderly way what the circumstances were when this happened. And so if they find a body, they're going to lay the skeleton out and do an analysis of the bones and whatever tissue was there. They're going to look at the grass. They're going to look at remnants of clothes. And what they're going to do is to try to take something which is not a coherent story and to somehow, by looking at its separate fragments, which are a mess over here, somehow using their tools and techniques to construct a coherent, probable story for what happened here. Now, I'm not putting this up to say your answer's in here somewhere. I'm putting this up to say, okay, what are you after? Are you after teasing form implications out? Are you after trying to figure out some configuration in here? What is it essentially you're looking to do with your topic in order to involve yourself with that topic in a scholarly way and in a form implication way? So what this is doing is it's challenging you to say, what's your method, what's your tool, what's your technique? Also, there's an interesting carryover, or possible one here, because these configurations can be the budding genesis of maybe the fundamentals of your thesis diagram. Because if I got the cop to say, okay, show me graphically how you guys came about finding this criminal, they probably would draw something like that. And so if somebody's, if you're having dinner with somebody and they say, well, what's going on with your thesis? The little doodle you would do on your napkin would be some graphic configuration which encapsulated the nature of your analysis. What in effect, what fundamentally are you looking to do to this thing? So you also get involved in investigative styles. Now this becomes a very personal kind of thing and sort of an introspective thing. For example, if I followed you around all day and I watched you do certain tasks, I could probably discern what your way of investigation and your way of working are. For example, if I watched you mow your lawn and how you came at that task, and how you mowed and what you mowed first and what you left and what you did last. Did you do the edges? Did you do the hard part first? Did you just set up a series of strips? How did you come at that task? I could tell something about how you come at things. If I watched you do a puzzle, how do you come at making a puzzle? Do you group things that have the same color? Do you work the corners first? Do you work the images that you can make out? what's the way you come at things? What's your tendency in terms of, or your style in terms of your tendency in terms of your way of working? If I watched you eat a meal, here you have 3 or 4 dishes on the plate. Do you like to pile them all up on the fork? Do you eat them one at a time? There's some people that finish a dish completely before they move to the next dish. Okay, so if I saw you do that, I could find out something about it. And if I gave you a hopelessly tangled knot in a rope, and I said, what are you going to do with this? Some of you would pick the rope up, and you would just gaze at the knot without touching the knot. And by looking and thinking, you would find the 1 or 2 moves that would undo it. That's a style. Another style is you look at it and you start yanking at it. You don't know why you're yanking, but you're going to change its configuration so that now it's more readable. You know, right now it's not readable, so let's yank and change the shape, and then maybe I can see some things. So I just sort of rattle it almost at random to change the playing field in a sense. And others will get a knife and just cut it. You know? So that's a style. That's a style where you go, why are we looking at the rope? Come on, let's get on with it. So we're willing to destroy the knot in order to open it up. So that gets into tendencies with respect to how we come at things. And there's not much we can say beyond that about that, except I'm urging you to be introspective about how you tend to work. What is your investigative style? Are you the guy that gazes at the knot, or yanks at the knot, or wants to cut the knot? So now I'm going to move over here to. Got a question? Okay. I'm going to move over here to the paradigm because I want to make sure I get through that today. Because I'm pretty sure whether you use it directly or just as a way of thinking, the structure of a paradigm might be a useful way of imagining taking this apart. And remember, we keep reminding ourselves analysis is fundamentally a dismantling operation. So paradigm, as you may know, if you look it up in the dictionary, it has to do with a way of viewing things. It's a world view, or it's a way of making sense. It's sort of an overarching view or sense of how something works, what it's for, all those kinds of things. So what would be in a paradigm? Paradigms always have certain components. So let's put the components up. And it's these components that I'm urging you to think about and to use perhaps in as a way of working, or at least a beginning way of thinking about what you're going to do to your topic. A paradigm always has a taxonomy. And that means that it has a naming system. A paradigm always begins with the labels of the chunks. In other words, it has a way of talking about the thing. And so the vocabulary of the topic, the terms that are used, the way the topic has been traditionally in the literature broken up into its subtopics. So taxonomy, another word for the taxonomy, what are the subtopics of your topic? The paradigm also has a structure. So if I have a topic, and I say, okay, this topic is typically composed of these subtopics. Structure says these topics are not just laying there on the table with no relationship. These topics have a particular structural relationship to one another. Not necessarily in terms of a bubble diagram, but there's some structural connectivity pattern going on between these things that speak to the structure, and structure means the linkages, structure means the connectivities between things. So it's useful to think not only in terms of how are things named and called, and what are the big chunks that make the topic up, but how do those chunks relate to one another? They could be relating to one another in terms of a nested relationship. You know, there are three things and they're all sub-aspects of one another. That could be a kind of relationship. Then all paradigms have what we call mechanics. Mechanics are the working, operational aspects of the paradigm. In other words, what moves, what affects what are the consequences, what are the products, what are the inputs, what are the outputs, what are the operations and the steps and the activities within the paradigm. In other words, what goes on. So if I'm looking at astronomy, I'm going to have a taxonomy for talking about the astronomical components. This is going to talk about their relationship, maybe their relationship spatially or in terms of time or whatever. This is the mechanics. This is the gravitational pulls and the motions and the collisions and that kind of stuff. So you can almost think of the mechanics as the structure in motion. You can think of the structure as the mechanics frozen in time. So the mechanics is the moving parts, the structure is frozen picture of the relationships. Then all paradigms have criteria for success. In other words, in this world, or in the world of your topic, what is considered good, what is considered successful, what is considered elevated, what is considered worthy, what is considered high trajectory. In other words, what does success look like in this paradigm? Because remember, when you're in your topic, you're in the world of that topic. And so this paradigm is trying to get you into the world of the topic. When you're in the world of the topic, what does success look like? All paradigms have rules of engagement. And that means that if this paradigm, if these components with this structure and these mechanics are chugging away, relating to one another in sort of different motions, rules of engagement say, what are the rules or the principles for me coming in here and intervening? What's the rule for taking something out? What's the rule for putting something else in? What's the rule for changing that motion? What's the rule for renaming that? So this gets into intervention. These are sort of the principles of how you work with this. And so if I'm over here and it's chugging away and I haven't touched it yet, rules of engagement say and presume that I'm going to come over here and do something to alter it. What are the rules for altering it? For example, sometimes the rule has to do with a sensitivity analysis. The rules say if you touch this, this, and this, not much is going to happen. But if you touch that, the whole thing's going to blow up. Or if you wiggle this a little bit, these are going to wobble radically. So the rules for engagement talk about how you come into the world of your topic and the kinds of, if you've got some sense for how you want to modify it, what are the principles for modifying it in a positive way? And then finally, all paradigms have some sort of context. And all that means is all paradigms, if this is a paradigm, they all float in larger environments. So context says, we just journeyed through paradigms per se. Now let's look at the larger world to which the paradigm belongs. What are its neighbors? What are the things that are similar to it? What are the things that keep it company? Now, these terms and this idea may at first blush seem remote from whatever the topic's going to be, sustainability, surrealism, photography, doesn't matter what it is. But I'm going to contend and urge you guys to think about what these are and to just hold in your mind how they might apply here and possibly be some mode of operating on your topic in order to put it through these operations down here. So the big message, I guess, or the big urging is to have a way of working. Don't just kind of muddle in and write a few things and have a few headings and say, okay, I got my analysis done. The quality of what you do to your topic and the method you use and the clarity with which you can explain it to yourself in your chair and others, that's what I'm getting at when I talk about a way of working. Having a plan of attack, having your verbs ready for what you plan to do to this thing. And as we saw over here with these other fields, depending upon what your topic is, your sets of verbs and your vision of how you're going to operate on that thing can be very different. What you do with photography and surrealism and urban renewal can be very different as diagrams and operational configurations because of the topic. So I'm not expecting you all to come up with a similar work plan, but I am urging you to come up with some sort of plan so that we get past just the word analysis and being able to talk about what the nature of the analysis is going to be, what the actual activities are going to be, and how they string together as a process and as a method. So that's the pitch today. Anybody got any questions about any of this?
Could you go over the mechanics again?
Mechanics is the whole thing in motion. So let's take, Aaron, you're doing photography, right? Let's take photography. Well, photography has, aren't you doing photography? You are now, huh? Who's doing photography?
Says, but he's already.
Okay. So we got photography. That's good he's not here so I can say what I want. He has a labeling system. Photography has a vocabulary for talking about it. Okay? And then, he's going to want to know what that vocabulary is. And then things are going to string together. For example, structure could be principles of taking photos, composing. The mechanics or the structure could have to do with the string of steps that you go through when you develop something. So thinking about photography, maybe there's even more than one structural thing. There's a structure for developing. There's a structure for taking the pictures. There's a structure for cropping the pictures. Mechanics is photography in motion. So now we're gonna live it. We're gonna do it. It's not just an abstract diagram anymore. Now we have the process of walking out on the site, choosing something, framing and composing, taking the picture, taking it back to the studio, cropping it, developing it, whatever it wants to be. And then that mechanics also includes how does it come out. So think of this as the mechanics frozen in time, and think of the mechanics as the life process going on. Now, what I don't know is how does the concept of mechanics apply to the various topics? Only you're going to know that. And probably some of these topics are going to be more easily seen as mechanics or physics or operation. Maybe that's not a good word. You can think of this as operation if you want, or movement or process. Whereas this is just the configuration showing the relationship between the labeling systems. So for you, you're doing the sustainability and the hemp thing. Mm-hmm. So you've got the mechanics or the structure. You've already told me hemp has three aspects. Mm-hmm. Okay. mechanics, if we just took that, would be the relationships between those and how they interact. And you've already told me that when you put some of those things together, you get certain things. Other things together, they get certain things.
Right.
And then those things probably have products beyond them.
Right.
So you just begin to think your way into it. And maybe it doesn't quite fit at first, but if you keep your head focused on, okay, I'm after the structure, now I'm going to imagine this in motion, your head gradually gets into what these things mean as they apply to your particular topic.
Okay.
And it could be that some of these are more applicable and useful than others. So I'm not saying everybody should be applying every one of these things to a topic, but I am saying if you have a topic and you're not quite sure how to proceed with the analysis, this is one way of beginning to think about what the nature of the analysis might be. Because that list covers a lot of bets. It covers a lot of what normally would happen in an analysis of a topic, no matter what the topic is. There was another hand. Who else had a question in here?
Yeah, you kind of answered the question already.
Okay. All right. Well, there may be a few other things to extend on analysis, but those are most of the things that I wanted to mention. So,
could you map more than one paradigm to each other and see how they relate or how they differ, or if at some point it would be a good thing or a bad thing to create something new from the two that you...
well, remember, all this stuff is just one. Now you got to imagine this happening here. So now we're down here with form implications for each. We're down here with scholarship for each. And then it all heads for home. Some sort of integration and synthesis, and then the application. So there's a convergence here. It's heading toward whatever physicalization you're going to entertain at the end of all this. When you're analyzing each one, you're concentrating on breaking that up into these kinds of camps. When you're doing this, you're not peeking out of the corner of your eye at that one. It's only when you're done with the analysis of both you begin to look at possible integration and weavedness. And we don't know what that will be until you get there. It could be that they collide and they don't marry at all. They could be mutually exclusive. Or it could be they're hand in glove. But that's what the nature of that mental exercise would be. And it's after you're looking at the holistic picture of all this, after all these things are done for all your topics, then you're poised to distill the principles you're going to use and apply them down here with your whatever you're going to design and make. So we just took one topic and talked about using it as an example, talked about the process. And that would be the way of working with how many topics that you've got. And that's why early on I said be careful with your title, be careful with the word you're using, because there can be a word in your title and it implies a topic. And you just thought it would be a sexy word in there. You didn't know you were making a promise to study it here. And that's one example of continuing to tinker with the title in relation to the analysis, in relation to all these things. Because it's not unusual for somebody to look at the title and the chair says, well, when are you going to start studying X? And you go, well, what do you mean? Well, you're saying an analysis of yada, 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 and an application of this. The third word says this. So you go, well, I'm not sure I want to take that on. Okay, well, it needs to come out of your title. It needs to not imply a promise to address something. And, you take your best shot at this as we are. And then as you live more and more of these chapters, that's why you've got to keep coming back to this. Because you'll discover things here you never suspected over here. And so you gotta come back over here and update this. And that's why it's a spiral and a frequent touching rather than saying this is done, let's move on. And that's really why too, instead of recommending that you work on the thesis where you do a chunk, you lay it aside, you do a chunk, you lay it aside, you do a chunk, you lay it aside, and you call it essentially finished. What I want to do is start everything and have it arise as simultaneously as we can in rough draft form, and then gradually tighten it all up together so that we ensure that there's an integration and a tapestry, a weavedness across all these components of the thesis. Rather than a piece of it here, we read that, we go down here and we read that, and you wonder, how'd you get this from this? The two are just too disconnected. It's a patchwork, it's a quilt, and it's obvious that when you did this, you had forgotten about that because you hardened this up too soon. So that's why we're trying to get it all up and running this semester. We're going to try to finish or tighten up as many things as we can. Things like the literature search and the precedent study, we can probably fairly confidently finish those things. Other things are going to remain more fluid. We can finish maybe parts of the introduction. We can maybe finish parts of the application. Other things like the conclusions may have to wait till next semester. So this will be an uneven graph of completion and confidence in the product at the end of the semester, but that's okay. The main thing is I want to work them all together. And I'm using this kind of connectedness as the reason why, when you wiggle this, that wiggles over there. It all connects together. It's like a mobile. If you thump this piece, those pieces over there, then it moves. You're going to do Monday, right?
Yeah.
You're going to be presenting Monday. And coming up, I think the end of next week. Yeah, the end of next week, I think we begin our guest. I think Valerie comes on Friday. But I'll give you guys a heads up as the various chairs are scheduled to come in. And then Wednesday, don't forget, I want you to update this. Update your map. And once we do that, I'm going to begin to ask for pieces of other things. And I'll be able to give you what you gave me a couple of days ago. I'll give that back to you early next week also. Almost done with that. Okay, see you all on Monday.